Hi everyone and welcome to another review. Today it's all about the new Canon RF 85mm 1.4L VCM lens. I find this lens quite impressive because of its 11 aperture blades, and they managed it to put an 85mm lens into such a small form factor that it compares to the 50mm 1.4L VCM, and I also own the 24mm 1.4L VCM. So they all have the same form factor, they all look the same from the side. The only difference is that you can feel it, it's a bit heavier than, for instance, the 50mm, the 35 and the 20, so as the 24mm. By the way, about 8 months ago, I sold my 85mm 1.4 because I was on a website and they claimed that they know that Canon was producing an 85mm 1.4 lens. So I said to myself, well, I love the 85mm. It's a super sharp lens. It gives this wonderful, nice blur background. But on the other side, it's super heavy. It's super big. And then I decided to sell it before this lens was actually announced, just to make a better deal. How it performs in daily life, how it is for photography and filming, I will show you this in this video. Now let's get started. Let's speak about the specs first. So this lens, as I said, it feels a bit heavier if you compare it to, for instance, the 20, the 24, the 35 and the 50mm. So you feel it, it's a bit heavier with 636 grams. The lens hood was included. It has a minimum focusing distance of 75 centimeters. The maximum aperture with all VCM lenses at the moment in October 25 is 1.4, and the minimum aperture is f16. You got an RF ring, which you can program. For instance, I set the focus field on this ring in the Canon menu. So anytime I turn on this ring, the size of the focus field changes, but you can also use it to change the aperture, white balance, so as the shutter speed. Then you got a focus ring, which has the same size with all the other RF lenses, like this one here, the 50mm. You have an autofocus manual switch here on the side and a button where I set the tracking. So you can set it in the Canon menu. Then you got an iris control ring, which changes the aperture. Unfortunately, you don't have the clicks. That, if you have ever shot with a Sony camera, you have the click switch on the side. That means you cannot accidentally turn this ring because you have a small protection. And I don't know why Canon does not provide a click switch, but I would love to have a click switch in the future. And it's well protected against dust and splash water. Then we're speaking about vignetting, so the dark corners. Of course, there is some vignetting at 1.4. If you stop down 2.5, 2.8 and even 5.6, you can clearly see that the dark corners disappear slightly, but you will always have a small amount of vignetting, but that can be easily corrected in Adobe Lightroom. Then we're speaking about chromatic aberrations. There was one lens in the past that I owned myself. It was the Canon EF 50mm 1.2L lens. So I haven't seen any other lens with these high amounts of chromatic aberrations like this lens. So you could see everywhere magenta and green shimmer. While 15 years later, we have now the 85mm 1.4L VCM, and I haven't seen any chromatic aberrations at all. Let's speak about lens flaring. There will be some lens flaring, and there's a lens hood to avoid lens flaring. So if you point this lens with an angle towards a light source, you will experience less lens flare, and if you point the lens straight into the sun, I would say you see a high amount of flaring, which can also look great, by the way, if you have a model standing in front of a sunset, for instance, and you want to capture some nice lens flare during a portrait shooting, and you kind of see some ghosting effects as well, as seen here on these clips. Then we're speaking about the autofocus, and of course, during the past years, Canon has developed one of the best autofocusing systems in the world, I would say. I am a lucky owner of the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, which I have here. I used the 85mm lens on this one, but the most amount of photos and videos I shot was on this camera here, that is the Canon EOS R1. So using this lens with both of these cameras, the autofocus and the tracking was brilliant. Just make sure to tell the camera before you're starting to shoot what you would like to shoot. So make sure you tell the camera when you're shooting a human, that's now a human, and if you want to shoot a vehicle, make sure to set it in the camera that you want to shoot a vehicle or an animal. Because if you tell the camera that you would like to shoot an animal, but you have a vehicle in front of you, that might look strange. But I would say with both of these cameras, the autofocus, so as the tracking, was brilliant. Even from further away, the camera start to realize that there is a kid running or that there is someone standing in front of the camera. So it's super fast in combination with both of these cameras. If you're shooting stills, I think it really doesn't matter what camera you're using, if it's an old Canon EOS R or RP, or maybe in the near future the Canon EOS R6 Mark III will probably have the same autofocus capabilities as the Canon EOS R5 Mark II or the EOS R1. But I would say in general the tracking was just brilliant and autofocus spot on. And I also have a small hint for you when it comes to stills. Anytime you shoot stills, for instance food, make sure to tell the camera that you don't want to track anything. So no human, no animal, no vehicle. Otherwise the camera kind of has the impression that if it sees a plate, for instance, that there would be a face. And to avoid this, tell the camera to track nothing. Let's speak about sharpness. So I use this lens on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, so as the Canon EOS R1. If you set the focus point on something, and it really doesn't matter at what aperture you're shooting, 1.4, 5.6 or 8, it will be extremely sharp. Don't expect a super sharp image if you're shooting at a 1.4 aperture and you want to shoot landscape, for instance. That doesn't really make sense, but anywhere where you set the focus point, it's extremely sharp. And it really doesn't matter if you're shooting at 1.4, 2.8 or f4. So you don't get that much distortion because you have a field of view of just 28.3 degrees on a full frame camera. And I would say it's also a brilliant lens for architecture if you want to shoot some details, street and product photography. Let's speak about handling. One of the best features of this lens is its small form factor. So if you were shooting already in the past with any other Canon RF lens, such as the 20, the 24, the 50mm, and you took this lens on a gimbal, the only adjustment that you need to make is to shift the center of gravity slightly towards the back, because it's a bit more front heavy than the other RF lenses that are out at the moment. But I would say one of the gadgets you definitely need is an ND filter like this one here. I've been using this one for all the other RF lenses, and that's also brilliant because they all have the same filter diameter of 67mm. That means I can use this Nissi Vario ND filter, which goes from 1 to 5 stops, so it's adjustable. And the colors look still natural on all the other RF lenses that I own myself. So you only need one ND filter, which I say is definitely required if you're shooting in log during daylight, if you have fixed shutter speeds, if you want to shoot at a fast aperture and at a fixed ISO value. It feels super nice in the hand. It's a bit more front heavy, as I just said, but if you want to shoot video, this lens in combination with either the Canon EOS R5 Mark II or the Canon EOS R1 compensates with the internal image stabilizer up to 7 to 8 stops. So all the shots that you've seen here in this video were handheld, and we come to video in a second. This focal length with this aperture, it's a brilliant lens for shooting portraits. We were out during autumn here now in Germany. It's super nice to create this wonderful blur background. The closer you are, the more blurry the background will appear. And as I said, the minimum focusing distance is just 75 centimeters. The autofocus and the tracking was just brilliant, and it doesn't really matter if we were shooting video or photos. So make sure to convince yourself with these examples. Then we come to the topic bokeh, and one big advantage that this lens has compared to the 85mm f2 macro, so as the 85mm 1.2L lens, is that we're having now 11 aperture blades instead of 9 on the older versions. So we are getting really round bokeh balls wonderful blur background. And I've been using the manual focusing here quite a lot on this lens just to see how well the focus goes from infinity to the closest focusing distance, and it just looks brilliant, which is also a nice lens if you're shooting under natural lighting conditions, for instance during low light. Let's speak about video. Well, as I just earlier said, we do have here two cameras with internal image stabilization. All the videos that you've seen here from this video were shot on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II and the Canon EOS R1, all handheld, and I have to tell you, wonderful. You don't see any vibration or something in there. There is no optical image stabilizer, as you can tell here from the side, but since Canon has a brilliant internal image stabilizer, you get wonderful results. The only thing, as I said earlier, make sure to get an ND filter to get that nice blur background during daylight, shooting at a fast aperture, at fixed ISO values. So let's summarize. It's the lens for me for portraits, blur background, details, and weddings. I was really lucky to sell my 85mm 1.2 lens due to its size, its form factor. Almost half the price, almost half its weight. We got 11 aperture blades instead of 9 in such a small form factor, which is unbelievable still to me that Canon made it possible to put an 85mm lens with a 1.4 aperture in this small housing. If you're shooting on a gimbal, the center of gravity is slightly more forward than with all the other RF lenses, so you have to bring the camera slightly towards you. There is some vignetting. I haven't seen any chromatic aberrations. And if you do see them, it's easily to correct them in Adobe Lightroom. And I also used this lens in the nightclub to take some DJ shots, which you can see right now. So I would say if you have the 85mm 1.2L lens and this lens was always a bit too heavy for you, too big for your camera bag, get the 85mm 1.4 lens. If you have the 85mm f2 macro lens and you need macro, keep your macro lens. And if you want to get some more blur background, but without macro, I would say in a much better build quality, get the 85mm 1.4L VCM lens. Now I'm really happy to hear your thoughts about this lens. If you have it already, if you want to get it in the future, if you were working already with the 85mm 1.2L lens or the macro lens, there's a lot of room under this video. And if you need something like this lens, the camera, the HDMI recorder, you will find it in my supporter link in the video description. See you next time here on The Daniel Life.